stuff.
Hi, this is Mike Bloom, and I'm here today with Michael Cronin, Assistant Professor of Japanese Languages and Literatures here at the College of William & Mary. We're talking about his research and his teaching, and we began the interview with his discussion of his research interests. Let's give a listen.
Most broadly, my field is modern Japanese literature and film. And my specific, the sort of subject of my research is the city and modern identity, and how, what role urban life plays in the construction and development of modern subjectivities. And the specific sort of object of my research is the city of Osaka in the period from roughly the 1950s, from the 1920s to the 1950s. And Osaka is interesting to me, first of all, because I spent 8 years in and around Osaka. Osaka is often called the second city of Japan now, Tokyo being the first city, of course. But in the mid-20s, Osaka was really, well, for a brief time, it was technically the largest city in Japan. And it was, in some ways, the most modern. A lot of the innovations in modern life started in Osaka before they were exported to Tokyo, often exported with capital from Osaka. And so sort of the process by which Osaka goes from being the most modern city in some ways to being very definitely subordinated to Tokyo across the period from sort of the build-up to war through wartime and then into the occupation. I think that's an interesting process to study. And in some ways, I think Osaka can tell us more about city and urban subjectivities than Tokyo can, because Tokyo, I think, is first a capital and second a city, whereas Osaka is purely a city.
Now, when you say purely a city, are you saying that this is a sort of prototypical city that you can measure all cities by, or do you mean a city in Japan?
Yeah. Even in Japan, it's certainly unique. There's no city that has such a prominent place in the national imagination as Osaka. And in some ways, that's what makes it, that's what allows it to stand up to the challenge from Tokyo, whereas other cities just sort of fade away.
Now, is that because it's an older city, or?
Yeah, it was, in the mists of time, it was the capital for a brief period, before it was known as Osaka. And then it was in the sort of early modern early modern period, it was the sort of military capital. It was the political capital, even though technically the capital was in Kyoto, where the emperor lived. And then even after Edo becomes Tokyo, the national capital, Osaka remains the sort of merchant capital and trade capital, industrial capital of Japan. And even today, it has enormous cultural prominence because of traditional artistic forms that are associated with Osaka, and also contemporary forms like stand-up comedy is very closely associated with Osaka, and the Osaka dialect is sort of the dialect of stand-up comedy.
Wow, that's really interesting. So now you say you study both film and literature. If I wanted to choose a film to watch that would show me something about the Japanese city.
Let's see. There are so many, but I think, well, there's one very beautiful Osaka film that I recently discovered with an English subtitle track. I didn't think it existed with subtitles, called Dodo no Kawa, or Muddy River, and that's a beautiful film about Osaka life. And for Tokyo, there's all kinds of films, but let's see. Well, Tokyo Story is a great film about sort of
Tokyo Story.
Tokyo Story.
Ozu,
that's right. Yeah, and about generation gap, but the generation gap is also mapped onto sort of the parents who live in the countryside and the children who live in the city. And then, another great Osaka film is Osaka Elegy by Mizoguchi, and that's an earlier film.
So those are sort of the two heavy hitter directors of those eras. Right?
Definitely, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, are those sorts of things that you like to teach?
Yes, yeah. I teach a class on the city in Japanese literature, and when I teach it, usually on my own, I split it up between Osaka and Tokyo, sort of half and half. This year I'll be teaching it with Rob Leventhal. We'll be doing the modern city, Germany and Japan. And so I expect...
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So are you going to have Japanese studies students in there and German studies students?
Yeah, it's split evenly.
And is it going to be a Japanese and a German designation, or are you going to have like an MDLL designation?
There are Japanese and German designations, and there are also 2 LCST designations, again, for Germany and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, I think, it's all full. We have 6 students right now from LCST, and then 15 each from German, in the German and the Japan listing.
So are you going to be choosing a particular theme and then studying that from each perspective?
Yeah, I think we will. Some weeks we'll each teach one session, and then other times Rob will take a week and look in more detail at one theme, and then I'll take the next week and pursue that theme in the Japanese context.
So what are some of the interesting topics that you study in the city? I mean, architecture, I guess, is an important theme?
Yeah, I don't look at architecture too much, just because I don't know enough about it. But we look, for example, at, let's see. Well, we'll be looking at avant-garde artists in the pre-war period, because the avant-garde usually grows up in the city. We'll be looking at urban space. In the case of Osaka, I definitely look at urban language, the idea that there's a particular language associated with Osaka as a city that's quite distinct from a national language. And then also urban, what you could call urban lifestyles or urban practices, how people spend their time in a city, how they map the city as they go about their day, the kinds of places you can visit in a city that you can't visit outside of one.
Now, are you finding that as you're collaborating with Rob Leventhal, that you're finding lots of similarities, lots of differences?
A lot of similarities, I think. Germany was a model for all aspects of Japanese modernity when Japan went through a very self-conscious process of modernization. They looked to Germany for example, what a modern imperial system should be like, or what a modern military should be like. And so I think there'll be a lot of cross-pollination between the two sides of the course. And it's great for me because I'm hoping that some of the ideas that come up in the class will help me write the introduction for my eventual book.
Oh.
To sort of broaden the...
So tell me a little bit about the eventual book.
Oh, well, it'll be a look at Osaka as it's imagined in literature and film of the trans-war period, again, from the sort of 50s to from the 20s to the 50s. And I look at some of the most significant authors of Osaka and what kind of a city they imagined in their literature. Then I look also at film adaptation, how film directors took that literary city and transformed it into visuals on film, and what happens to the locality, that local quality of the city in that process of adaptation.
Well, this has been great. The one thing that I always have started to ask everybody is, since I'm always looking for a new book to read, I would like a book recommendation that something might be fun to read or something that would be interesting for the layperson that might tell me something about Japan and what you're interested in when you look at Japan.
Okay. Is it okay if it's a fiction book?
It can be a fiction book, it can be whatever.
Okay. Well, the novel I always recommend is Sasame Yuki. In translation, the title is The Makioka Sisters. It's by Tanizaki, one of the great, possibly the greatest sort of wartime and post-war author in Japan. It's a fairly long novel, but it's a very readable novel about four sisters. Two of them are already married. The two younger sisters are trying to get married. And it takes place in Osaka, Kobe, but then one of the sisters lives in Tokyo as well. And draws a lot of interesting comparisons and contrasts between the two cities, especially because Tanizaki himself grew up in Tokyo and then moved to Osaka after the Tokyo earthquake in 1923, and really fell in love with Osaka, but looked at it with an outsider's eye.
Great. Well, Michael Cronin, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
This will be up on the